Good afternoon. Welcome to all of you. I want to really extend my heartfelt thanks to everyone that is here. Your support of the Parents Fund has allowed us to do some great things. Most recently, we gave over $100,000 to student organizations here on campus during the past fall semester. Um, and it also kind of gives the newly created Division of Student Engagement and Wellbeing some flexibility that can support some programs that might otherwise fall through the cracks. Georgia Tech is a very special place. It's full of special students, and they wouldn't be here without your support. So thank you. Next, I want to take a second and introduce Dean Stein. He is the Associate Vice President of Student Engagement and Wellbeing, as well as the Brant Fritz Dean of Students Chair. He is in his 20th year at Georgia Tech and his 15th as the Dean of Students. So Dean Stein, thank you for being here today. I'm going to start with just a few questions, and then we'll be sure to save some time at the end so our parents can ask some questions as well. So if you have a question, just kind of hold on to it. We will use the raise hand function in BlueJeans, or if you want to use the chat within the video, the chat function, we can take questions from there. So I want to start with Dean Stein once again. Thank you very much for taking the time. So during your 15 years as Dean of Students, what have you learned about yourself, and what impact has working with the students made on you as a person?
Well, first of all, thank you, Will, and thanks everyone for joining in. It's a smaller group here, and so I think hopefully we can have more of a conversation after the first few questions that Will is going to be putting in front of me. I want to say greetings from Atlanta. It's a beautiful day here. It's 57 degrees, bright sunshine. Our students are walking around campus in shorts still at this point in November. So I think, and they're anxious to either get home to you or to have a break and for a few days before we go into the final stretch of the semester. We are just days away upon return from the break. We have 7 class days followed by a reading day, and then we move into finals. So we are really right there at the finish line. So first I want to say it's an absolute privilege to be sitting in the Dean of Students chair at Georgia Tech. It's an unbelievable job that is filled with so many wonderful things. And 2022 marks the 100th anniversary of the Dean of Students role at Georgia Tech. So that's a significant milestone for us at Tech and in the Dean's office. I am the 15th to occupy the job in the 100 years. So you can see that some of our deans in the early days came and stayed a very, very long time. What I feel with the dean's role and what students have taught me is a lesson that I actually learned during my undergraduate days, not here at Georgia Tech, elsewhere. And that is, the power of one. And let me explain that. Because I've taken that lesson, which I fully understood later on in life, not at the moment that it was happening, but my senior year of my undergraduate days, I had a dean of students pull me aside and have a conversation with me and introduced me to this field and, said to me that he thought that I should really consider going into higher education and student affairs, student life, whatever you called it. Because he had watched me in my leadership roles as an undergrad and felt that I really had the ability to be successful. That one conversation over lunch changed the course of my career and my life. It introduced me to a field that I really hadn't even thought about, and one that was, certainly new. And I began to explore it, and I had some additional kind of informational conversations with people. I learned about the different degree programs that one would seek out in terms of higher master's level or PhD, and decided to pursue it and give up other possibilities that were kind of on my list. That power of one conversation, is really what I've brought to this position in the dean's role. And by that, I mean the power of one conversation, one intervention, one recommendation, one caring outreach can make a huge difference in our students' life. And I bring that every day into my work and in my relationship with students, because you never know, just like he didn't know, that dean, the kind of impact that had on me and how it changed everything. And I have been fortunate here at Tech, being here 20 years, I got a lot of conversations with students. And I've been fortunate because some of those students have come back and have said to me, Dean Stein, remember that conversation we had, or remember that recommendation you made, or remember that time you reached out to me. I have to be honest, sometimes I don't even remember that because I have so many conversations with students that it's hard to remember every single one. They usually tell me what happened during that conversation, even what I've said, or the gist of what I've said, and help me understand kind of the difference that made in their lives. And that's really the lessons that students have taught. They teach me about, obviously, Georgia Tech. They teach me about their experiences here, and what they go through, and the highs and lows, and the wonderful things about it, and sometimes the less than wonderful things about the experience. But what they really do teach is kind of how a reminder for me and for everyone else who works with students, the power that we have in relating to the students and listening to them and assisting them in whatever way we can. And so until the day I leave this position, I will always kind of remember that, and that's how I approach my work. So thanks for asking.
No problem. You talked very briefly about 20 years ago and coming here to Georgia Tech. And over the past 20 years, can you touch on maybe how the student body has changed?
Sure. Lots of changes, lots of good changes. First off, we have a much more diverse student body than we did 20 years ago. We have a higher percentage of women here now, significantly higher than when I first came. We have a higher percentage of first generation students than when I first arrived at Tech. We have a much more diverse student body as far as racial identity and stuff. And so it is much more diverse in terms of who comprises our student body and all of the different experiences and talent and life experiences that they bring to each other and to the campus. It's also changed in terms of interest of major. You see a much broader spectrum in terms of what students are interested in, or you see the kind of major of the moment and how that's playing out. Like computer science is one of the most popular majors now for a number of years. But that was not true when I came 20 years ago. It was clearly engineering, and electrical engineering was very, very popular back then. It still is. But so you see the difference between kind of what's playing out in the world and in opportunities for individuals, and then what they are drawn to. Business has really increased significantly here. Students actually come to Georgia Tech now to major in business, whereas early on, 20 years ago, it almost felt for some students like it was a default major if the original major didn't work out. That is no longer the case, I'm happy to say. Ivan Allen, in terms of the liberal arts, students coming and wanting to major in liberal arts. So I think that, the place has kind of grown, and it is diversified in so many different ways. We are certainly much bigger than we were back then. The size of the student body has grown both at the graduate and undergraduate level, which has also meant that our staffs have had to grow. our division has grown out of necessity in terms of meeting the needs of students. The the facilities that we're building and kind of what's inside those facilities and what students are looking for and what families are looking for in terms of what they want for their sons and daughters, their students, has changed. And so we have much different looking buildings, and technology is huge in these buildings. And kind of social spaces in academic buildings. The library has changed. I mean, there's just like so many changes. And really, what I would say is when I'm in the company of alum from a while ago, say 10, 15, 20 years ago, if they tour the campus, one of the things they say is, I don't recognize the campus anymore because so many new buildings are here now. And that is true. If I take a ride around campus, I can go, that's new since I came, that's new. So there's been a lot of new building and construction that has happened, which means that Georgia Tech is still on the upward trajectory here, and we haven't peaked, which is a great thing for our students and for all of us.
So with the added diversity and the new buildings and all of those and the growth, what are some of the challenges that you and your staff have kind of had to adapt to? Or conversely, have the students' needs generally stayed the same?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that it's meeting all of the needs of students who are so diverse and trying to understand the different cultures that students come from. And how certain issues play out and how they're defined within certain cultures. One I'll mention is the issue of mental health. That's been a growing concern for us on the campus and across the country, not just Georgia Tech. We've had to increase our staffs. We've had to create new opportunities and new ways of focusing on this issue. We created CARE, which is our triage center, as a means of trying to offset the counseling center a bit and figure out how to work with students more efficiently and directly. But we also have a need to understand, why certain students resist going for help. And some of it at times is cultural in knowing how the issue of mental health is addressed or not addressed, is accepted or not accepted in certain cultures. So it's required the staff to become much more educated around issues and stuff. The staff is also trying to, diversify the types of programs that we do for students and not to just go back to the same traditions that we have. There are some traditions that we hold on to dearly, but we've created new traditions over time to meet the needs of different populations of students. And in some respects, we've had to learn, a whole new language at times in terms of our growing LGBTQIA population of students. There's been a lot of education for staff and faculty in that arena. So it really has changed dramatically, and part of our responsibility is to keep up and understand the generation of students that we have on our campuses and how best to work with them, and then to try and predict the next generation that will be coming to us down the road. So it's always a challenge to kind of stay on top of that. And the other piece I'll say, in speaking to families here, is the role that families play in their students' education and lives. This is a generation that many of them have much more of a connection to you and keep in touch with you in ways that my generation would not have when we were in college. I mean, back in the day, and that's a long time ago, I realize, we would line up on a Sunday and stand on line to get on the phone in the hall and call home. All right, it's a very different time in terms of students and families, the fluidity of it in terms of communication and staying engaged with each other is very different, and the role that families play. And we here in the division and in higher ed walk that fine line between what the law says that we have to abide by and then trying to work with families to assist them in supporting their students and giving them as much information as we can. But there are still limitations to what we can share. So
You touched on mental health at the beginning of your statement, and there's been a lot of kind of discussion and a lot of writing and talk about words like mental health, but then also resiliency, in particular this generation of students. So, what challenges are out there for students today, and how have they kind of changed throughout the years and required students themselves to be resilient?
yeah, well, I want to say that mental health is a very, very important issue, but we really need to talk more about mental wellness and resiliency, because most of our students are not in that mental health spectrum. They're not that far along down the continuum that's really a major issue. The majority of students are faring well. Now, when I say that, that doesn't mean that they're not having stressful days, they're not having, a life event or something that occurs, a bad grade, a bad test, that kind of brings them down and gets them thinking in a certain way. So I don't want to dismiss that. But what I'm saying is that the majority of students really are in that kind of middle space of faring okay and doing quite well, right? A small percentage of students are further down the continuum. And the way that I frame it is that on any given day, you could have students in that stressful space. And last week was a very stressful space on campus because it was a very big test week for Georgia Tech, because it was that last round of exams before finals. And so you had a lot of very stressed out students, and they were telling us that in many different ways. There are some students now and last week, and probably for the remainder of this semester, that will move further down, and they will be in a state of distress, meaning that their functioning in terms of being a student is really impacted by their ability to kind of hold it together, do the work they need to do, stay focused on, getting to the finish line, because they're just so overwhelmed, they're so anxious, or other things going on in their lives. And we have to differentiate between those populations of students and make sure that we're meeting the needs of the students in the right way. Resiliency is extremely important. I mean, it's a skill that we all need to hone, continue to hone. I do want to say the majority of students are pretty resilient, and most of us are pretty resilient. And the last year and a half, 2 years, has proven that people are pretty adaptable. It's amazing how adaptable we really are when we have to be. It doesn't mean that there's not discomfort. It doesn't mean that there's a bit of a struggle at times, but most of us are able to adapt, and I would say that our students adapted quite well. They adapted to online learning, which was not fun, and it was a major, major challenge for everyone, our students, our faculty, our advisors. It was not easy, okay? And there was that period of adjustment that we were all trying to get through and stuff. And we learned a lot. Our faculty learned a lot, and everyone else did. Our whole mental health staff had to shift over to telebehavioral health, and had to be able to be ready for that kind of experience, and the difference between sitting with a student in your office versus having a conversation, a kind of therapeutic conversation online. So there was a lot of adjustment going on. But I think we fared pretty well. It wasn't perfect, never is, but we did fare pretty well, and I think our students are quite resilient. Students don't see that in themselves, and see, much of what I try to do is to listen to them and listen to what they say, ask certain questions, and then reflect that back to them, that despite everything you've just said, you're managing. Okay, it hasn't been easy, but you're doing pretty well. And you're figuring out how to get through this with the right support and right help. I think the key for Georgia Tech students that I find over the course, this has not changed over 20 years, and that is Georgia Tech students don't like to ask for help. Okay? It's not something they just readily want to do and they feel good about. And part of what we all have to help them understand is that in life, there are times when all of us need help and all of us need some assistance, and there's nothing wrong with asking for help. And you do not have to do everything alone. There are people here on the campus, there are lots of people on the campus to help you. So,
Thanks. That's a good thing to remember. I'm always reminded that tech students wouldn't be at tech if we didn't think they could do it, right?
correct. We do not
So,
admit students that we don't believe can make it through Georgia Tech. That is very, very true. Yes.
right. And speaking of not doing it alone, this first semester we've been combining campus services and student life for the new Division of Student Engagement and Wellbeing. Can you just kind of give an update and let us know how that's going in practical terms, how it's happening, what's going on, and where we are with it?
Sure. Again, it's a very exciting moment for us. We have taken two major divisions, campus services and student life, and combined them into one. We have gone, student life had a staff of about 150. The combined now is that we have a staff of about 800. So you could see the huge difference between combining these two staffs. I'll be very honest, this is our first semester, and we are still in an adjustment period. I mean, we're still trying to work out how best to work with each other and how to blend. And one way to think about this is a blended family, two families that come together and try to create one. And that's kind of what's going on here. We're trying to create a common mission and vision. We're trying to figure out how best to work with each other and support each other. But the good news is that we're all one, and we're all in the business now of thinking about students in a holistic way. Where they eat, where they live, what major they're in, what their mental health needs are, what about recreation and fun and enjoyment. And so we're all kind of part of those conversations together now, which wasn't true in the past. We had one division focused on this, another division focused on some other things, and now we're all kind of in that space together to be able to look at a student's holistically and create opportunities and support for them. And we have a new vice president. I just want to say that Dr. Hong has been with us since August. She is terrific, and she is full of energy and has some great thoughts. She's helping us through this transition time. I have enjoyed working with her immensely, and I know that she will do great things here at Georgia Tech.
So do you have some real life examples about how that merger of the two departments has already started to help students?
Yeah, well, I think there are a number of different things. When we have combined retreats now, we had just had one where we were looking at the continuum of that first year from the time that the student is accepted and how they go through orientation and then come back or stay and move into our residence. So to build out a continuum of support for first year students from the time we accept them through the whole process of that first year and realize what pieces of it we all have and how we can work together to support that first year student. Now, I'll tell you, last year, because of the pandemic and stuff, one of the things that we are focused on is our second year students who very much feel like first year students because they did not go through that experience. So in terms of thinking about this, we have actually broadened this to a first and second year kind of discussion. We're also looking about how what we're doing on this side is affecting the academic side. So we have living learning communities, and the question is, are they successful? Should we continue with those? Should we build on them? Should we create more opportunities? Is this a generation of students that are interested in those living learning communities. And what do students want from the places where they live? There are universities where faculty live in residence. We're not convinced that Georgia Tech students want their faculty living in residence halls with them. And those are the kinds of discussions. So you see, it kind of brings the academic side, the student life side, and the housing side together in terms of trying to think through those issues.
Can you talk a little bit about how the new division is going to continue to have that positive impact on students?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's many different ways. I know that the vice president is planning on creating a student advisory committee that she will meet on a regular basis. Both she and I separately meet with our student leaders to discuss whatever issues they want to bring to the table. The president even makes time to meet with the SGA presidents and talk through certain issues and stuff. Students bring to the table all kinds of issues. It was just part of a discussion on Friday where students were trying to get language approved through the academic side of the house on students having time to vote, to exercise their civic responsibility and stuff, and to make that clear enough so that there is no issue in terms of faculty understanding that the student has the right to do that, and that the institute acknowledges that, the university system acknowledges that, and so a student shouldn't be penalized with, missing a class or having to make up a test because of something that they have the right to do. It's those kinds of issues that I think students can bring to the table, and now this division, as we have in the past, will continue to address and stuff.
So you brought up the voting. That's a great example. Are there any other really good examples of things that you've had from students that have actually come to fruition?
Yeah, food's big. What we serve in our dining halls, what we don't serve enough of. We have a very diverse student body, and there's a call for more cultural food. We have an increasing population of Jewish students on campus, and some are looking for kosher options within our residence halls, dining halls. So yeah, these are the kinds of issues, again, that we're addressing, and we're addressing them collectively now from both the student life and the campus services side of the house. Food is another big one that's come up this year. The other issue is just in terms of funding for programming and opportunities for students to have, and I do have to say that's where the Parents Fund comes in. This is not a setup question in terms of, I just want to say, but it's very, very important because, we have not been able to increase our student activity fee for a number of years now because the university system is not allowed for any. And that's understandable. We're trying to keep costs down and stuff. But what it's done is it's put a limited and a finite number in terms of what students and student government has available to work with over 500 clubs and organizations. So buzz funds from campus services side and the Parents Fund from our side, these are the things that help supplement the activities that we can then create for students and for student organizations.
So just last question, and then we'll kind of open it up for everyone else. Can you talk a little bit about the future? You've talked a lot about the past. What are the kind of future plans for student-specific programs within the new division, and what are your hopes to come out of the future?
Yeah, the future is, something that we can't fully address right now. I just came from a meeting that looked at enrollment projections for Georgia Tech for the future. And, it's an art and it's a science, right? What we have a sense is that we will grow even more and we will be larger than we are now at the undergraduate level. That was told clearly to us. Now, that alone has major, major implications for us in terms of our residence halls and the capacity of beds, our dining halls and the capacity there. the infrastructure in terms of staff available to work with all those students, the additional kind of layers of emergency response that will come with a larger population of students on campus, the need for more programming and activities. So there's plenty to look at and to work on. And I don't have all the answers there, and nor should I. I think part of this is like working with students and planning this and figuring it out. Our responsibility lies in making sure that we have the proper infrastructure for whatever enrollment we have on our campus, so that our students and our families are getting what they need to be successful, both in the classroom, in certain majors, and then where they're living, where they're eating, and other areas, along with the issue of safety on campus. As enrollment increases, there are all kinds of other issues that come with that and stuff. So, but it's an exciting time for us here at Tech, and I think the future will be equally as exciting. I mean, I couldn't predict 20 years ago where we would be today. And that's the fun piece of it, is to kind of imagine, but really not truly know like where we'll be in 20 years from now. So.
Well, thank you. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to the parents for questions. You can either use the raise hand function, or you can type in a question in the chat, and we'll ask Dean Stein. Be sure to unmute your mic when you get ready to ask your question. So if anybody has questions, now would be the time. I have just a happy question. I'd love to know, in all your time here at Tech, admittedly, I was a student here 20 years ago, and I have a lot of great memories. What's something of yours? What's a favorite memory of yours over the past 20 years?
Wow, that's a great question. I do see someone raise their hand. So, one of the first things that comes to mind, one of the most special moments I had at Tech was being invited by the rec club to ride in the Rambling Wreck on game day onto the field with the driver. And that's like an unbelievably special moment to be sitting there and break through that paper and come in and see all the fans. And that was, to me, a very, very, very special moment. So, yes. But there are many that I have. That's just one that kind of quickly comes to mind.
That would be special for anyone. I would agree.
So I think Stephanie has.
Steph,
yeah.
Hello, thank you so much, Dean Stein.
Sure.
Here's my question. So when you look back on your years, do you think that mental health issues were prevalent 10 to 15 years ago, but that there was just less awareness? And then the follow-up to that is, assuming that perhaps they are more now for sure than they were then, what in your experience, besides the more obvious social media and social isolation, what in your experience would you attribute the increase over the 10, 15 years that have passed?
Yeah. Great question. I have always been focused on mental health. So for me, it has always felt like it's been present. Okay. I don't see a difference. What I do see is a difference in the crisis situations that we're addressing and having to figure out here. Things that have increased are the number of students who are in such a crisis that they need to go to a hospital for further assessment. That has dramatically changed over 20 years. 20 years ago, students would come in. Obviously, they would be upset. We would get them hooked up to a therapist. They would have conversations. But we didn't have the same level of crisis that we are experiencing now. And also the number of students that readily admit to suicidal ideation or thought, that's increased significantly over time. Now, I do want to say that anytime a student expresses that, we take that very, very seriously. But I also want to say that there are many students who say that, but also would not act on it based on what they're sharing. Now, we go with the thought that, we have to act as if, they have thought this through. But suicide ideation, I think, is huge change for us. So, again, so what I would say is that the students who are at that further end of the continuum has increased. Okay, than it more so than it was 20 years ago. Now, the question of why, it's a complicated question. I think there's many different reasons. I think society has changed over the past 20 years. I think parenting has changed over the past 20 years. The social media piece absolutely is a significant piece. I think the expectation in terms of success and what young people believe they need to accomplish in order to make it in the world or be successful has changed. And so I think the students' ability to navigate and sit with discomfort. It's such a time that there's a quick fix, it feels like, to almost everything. You don't like something on the TV, you just hit the button and you change it. I mean, they're growing up in a time when they're not kind of required to sit with things, to learn how to be in the space and at peace with something, all right? And that's huge. That's very different. And any time that something can't be quickly changed, quickly fixed, really sets some students, not all students, but sets some students into a panic, into their anxiety increases, their worry increases, and it almost, for some, moves into fatalistic thinking. That it's not going to change, I'm not going to be successful, and it goes down that path. But if there's one thing that we can all help students, I think, really hone and work on, it is this capacity to just sit. There are things that are just tough sometimes. Grief is difficult. And any given year, a number of our students lose relatives, grandparents, parents, siblings, friends. I mean, it happens, right? And you have to sit with that. It is terribly uncomfortable. It's sad. But it's trying to get the student to understand that this is how it feels in the moment, and help get them to believe that it's not always going to feel like this, right? That there's the capacity to feel better and for things to improve. But certainly in this moment, it is, difficult. And I think that's kind of really what I find myself working with students on. Sometimes even appropriately just doing some personal disclosure to get the student to understand something. I'll give you a very quick story. A young male student saw me on campus and pulled me aside and said, "Dean Stein, I had the best conversation today with my faculty member in class." And I said, "Really?" I said, "What happened?" He said, "It was a stressful moment." This was last spring. Stressful moment. We were towards the end of the term. Everybody was really stressing out and freaking out and stuff like that. And the faculty member paused at the beginning of class and just acknowledged that and said, "Hey, I know this is a difficult time. We're close to the end of the semester. Things feel, painful and difficult, and you're wondering, how you're going to do. And you might even start feeling like depressed over this and stuff." And he said, "I hear you. I get it. When I was an undergraduate, I went through this. And there were moments where I really felt pretty bad. And there was a moment where I needed to reach out and get some help myself," right? Now, for this young man, that one conversation, again, the power of one, that one conversation inspired him, gave him hope. He's like, he struggled, but look at where he is today. He's at Georgia Tech. He's a professor, right? And he just said, "I just felt like at that point, yeah, it is tough, but I think I can get through this, and I think I can get the help that I need." See, and it's those kinds of, I think, conversations that all of us can have with our students and to help them manage.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Stacy, I see your hand. We have a question from the chat real quick, and then I'll come over to Stacy, okay? So Grant Campbell from chat says, with 500 clubs, did the number of students participating drop way off last year with COVID? And if so, have they rebounded this year?
Yeah. Well, look, we didn't have that many in-person activities last year, honestly. We had a lot of virtual activities. So we were really pleasantly surprised by the number of students that showed up virtually for activities. We weren't sure about that, but, if it's the difference between nothing and that, I think students voted and actually wanted, to be a part of something. Social isolation is difficult for all of us. And so, I think last year we did see a drop off, but I think that was plainly due to the fact that we weren't in person. We have seen a tremendous rebound back this year. Activities are yielding great audiences. Students are wanting to be in each other's companies. We probably have somewhere around 40 new student organizations that students have started this semester, which is not unusual for us, but they're still very much in it. SGA is still funding a significant number of activities every week. So we're really happy. They're voting with their feet, and so we're thrilled that it's come back in full force.
I'll add to that the little bit of perspective that I have with the Parent Fund and its work with student organizations. It's almost double the interest that we received last year. It's a lot of people that want to make up for lost time that they missed out on last year, and they're ready to do something. So just to kind of tag along.
I do want to say on the, I think it's always important to give balance. So because I see both sides of many different things here. Here's the one thing I will note is that it feels like, especially for our first year students, that somebody opened the gate and they just ran out and they're going hog wild. Okay, some of them, not all of them. And they just want to party and they want to have a good time. Okay. And so one of the things that I'm concerned about is the increase in the number of students, first year students, going to the hospital for alcohol intoxication. That number has increased this semester. And I have met with every single one of those students and a family member, either virtually or in person. And every single one of them, we have a conversation about what happened that evening, for as much as they can remember of what happened that evening. And some of them have a hard time remembering because they drank so much. They can remember to a certain point. But in the end, the theme that just kept coming back in terms of an answer was, I just wanted to have fun. It's been so long since I had fun, with the pandemic and stuff, that I wanted to just go out and have a good time. And, I get that. I mean, and then we discuss the issue of fun and what that means and how you can go out and have fun and even go to a party, right? And all that. But, the kind of boundaries that one needs to keep and, and really my conversations in the end are more around, less about alcohol and more around decision making and choices that the student makes in any given moment, in any given evening, and try to get them to see that they set in motion something and they had no capacity after a certain point to bring it back, to rein it back in. They lost that ability for themselves, okay? And so that's really what we're talking about here. But it does feel like this class of first year students just were waiting to be away from you and with us and just like be out there and have a great time. And again, not all students, but there is a concerning number of students that we've had to address this issue with this year. So,
Stacey, if you want to go ahead with your question.
Thanks so much. Dean, I just had a quick question about how you're getting feedback from students. You just as an example, you mentioned about the dining choices and all the different types of food that students need. And I was with a group of students this week, and they were just expressing their frustration over the lack of late night dining options for them when they're studying late at the library. And so those are, just an example. So when you're looking at how to improve a student's well-being, how are you going about asking the students the kinds of things that are adding stress to them, or the opportunities they see for improvement?
Yeah, great question. And we do that in a variety of ways. Let me talk about this semester how we've done it. We do surveys of students. We do town halls. SGA has hosted a number of town halls for students that anyone can log on and be part of a conversation. The vice president just hosted one with SGA over about a week and a half ago, where students could come on and talk about any issue that they wanted to. The dining services does surveys with students in terms of their needs. We also hear from other places. The one thing I would say, like with the kosher food, I received back from one of the rabbis feedback from students in terms of what they were hearing from students. So there are other people on the campus that can kind of also tell us what students have been saying to them. We hear it directly from students who send emails, and many of them do send emails in terms of some of the issues or some of the concerns. We hear it from parents who, have conversations like you did, where you then would follow up with us to say that I was in the company of students and this is what they were saying, and you kind of bring that over to us, and then we kind of figure out what to do with that information and stuff. So there's a whole variety of ways that information comes our way. And I do want to reassure you that there's not a lack of information coming. Students are very good about bringing different issues to us, whether it's through student government or directly to us. I'm teaching a freshman seminar this semester, and I have 17 first-year students in my class. And, I spend time just talking to them about their experiences. And I hear all kinds of things from them in terms of what's going great and what they feel really good about, and then what are some of the things that they would like to see different, or some of the things that, have been a disappointment for them, even in their first semester at Georgia Tech. So, yeah.
All right, Dean Stein. If there are no more questions, which I'm just double checking, I don't see any in the chat. I just want to take this minute and thank you, Dean Stein, but also thank the parents. Again, a lot of what we do wouldn't be possible without your support. We love hearing from you. You guys all asked some very good questions. And Dean Stein, thank you very much for your time. The recording of this will be going out to all of our parents that were invited within the next few days. Thank you very much. If anybody has any other questions, or if you think of something later, feel free to email me directly and I will pass it along. So, Dean Stein, if you have anything else to say, we can sign off.
I want to say thank you. I want to, ask that if your student is coming home for Thanksgiving, just give them some time to sleep and eat and have a, bit of a relaxing break from us. And, they'll be coming back and gearing up for the final push. But, and if you hear anything that you feel we should know during their time home with you, please email us and let us know that, okay? Or encourage them to tell us directly, either way. Have a great Thanksgiving for those of you that celebrate it.
Thank you, everyone.